Some other sessions do it via Zoom.
Yeah, you said it's easier via Zoom, right? Because I attended a hybrid session yesterday where I could not see the presentation when it was shared kind of in the room.
Well, I don't know. So I've seen it work both ways. In the hybrid sessions, I've seen it work where the in-room tech support can share the screen to the online presenters. But do we have, it would have to be Marlene or Simon in the room with their laptop doing that, but I don't think that's the plan, right?
I don't know, Marlene, what's your preference? I don't think we can hear Marlene yet. We can see her and we can see Paula. But we cannot hear them yet.
They're muted.
Yeah, but we cannot unmute them. Just says ask to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Hello. Nice to see you.
Hello.
I just talked.
That microphone is not on.
Hello, hello.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yes, it is now on.
Hi. About the slides.
Yeah.
I think, or I talked with the tech support here. Sylvia, if you want to share them, that should also work.
Yeah, let me just try it for a second that we know how it looks like.
Yep, that looks great, Sylvia. I can see everything.
Yeah.
Good. And Christiana's joined us. Lovely to see you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for coming. Hope you're enjoying your European summer.
Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Oh, you're still muted.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I'm muted. Sorry. Yes, it's terrible. My European summer is terrible.
I had a terrible European month. So after I saw you last. So.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I heard your plans were particularly terrible. Yeah.
Very, very terrible. Very terrible. Yeah. Capri, terrible. Yeah. Oh, they did bring home COVID, which is why I'm not traveling to this one.
Oh no.
Do we have contact with the tech folks in the room, or will we have to speak to them through Marlene?
They are out of sight. Wait, you don't see me either. Hey.
Hi.
I'm just checking that the in-room microphone is also working. So I'll be walking around with this one to allow people to ask questions.
I actually don't know if that microphone in your hand is working because you're so close to that other microphone.
Oh, yeah. Do you hear me good?
Yes, yeah, it's working great.
Do you have a question for the tech support? They are.
My one question is, can we move the in-room camera so that we can see the audience?
I can actually get behind it and move it a little bit so you can see the audience. I can't move the camera itself, but I can pan over to whoever's talking if need be.
Yeah, I think that would be great if we can try to give the online folks more of a view of the room. Sylvia and Ren, how do you feel about this idea?
Yeah, I like it. It's a good idea. As long as we see also the panelists when they are speaking, but I think if we get questions, that would be nice to see the audience.
Yeah.
So I think he's saying he can't move it back. He'd have to just turn it each time. So I would choose the panelists over the audience. Sadly, we have to make a choice.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure what the options were. I just wanted to ask.
You could just ask people to briefly say their names, so at least we know, or maybe anything. Well, yeah, I guess we might not know. I mean, people might not all know each other, so
yeah.
This is not ARCs after all. Yeah.
Yeah. Or we could try to ask Marlene to use.
So we're just leaving the camera where it is?
Yes, I think we're going to leave it where it's at for now.
All right, copy that.
What we could do is we could try to ask Marlene to maybe log in and use her laptop that she can show us the audience if you want.
I couldn't really hear you.
Okay.
Oh, that was directed at one of our organizers, not to you. I'm sorry, what's your name? The person, the disembodied tech support voice?
Jason.
Thank you. Nice to meet you,
Thanks,
Jason. I'm Nicholas.
Yeah. The other thing, Nicholas, is there is that mic stand right there in the middle. We could leave the mic in that and ask people to walk up and ask a question. Then we could see them when they ask a question. The back of their head. Oh, it's moved now. So
Yeah, I think it's important to ask people to say their name and to use a mic, because that's been a frustration for me, is not being able to understand who is talking and asking questions. So that I'll ask people to do that. So just very briefly on the order of things, Sylvia, how are we doing on who is responsible for which slides? Are we all kind of comfortable with where we're at?
I am. Yes, I think that's fine.
you were doing our section, Nicholas, so I'm very comfortable.
What do you mean?
Remember, we said we weren't dividing up that section. You and I were originally doing, you're doing it on your own because it was going to be too busy. So
Okay.
So question for you guys, if we move the mic stand to right here, can I get you a step to the side? So they're facing the camera when they speak, would that work good?
That would be
Yeah, that
excellent.
would be wonderful.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is where they'll be then, right here, facing straight towards you guys.
That sounds great. Thank you, Jason.
Yep, no problem.
Hello, Simon.
Hi, Simon.
When we speak, is it broadcast into the room?
Yes.
So,
Okay. So Simon is just ignoring us. That's what's
No,
happening.
I think he's looking at us, but not at the camera.
I hope we don't scare people, and that they have to stand up and go in front of a microphone looking at us to speak.
It's a brave new world.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to ask a question, just stand up and go in and look at the camera.
Yeah, that's a good point. It might have a bit of a chilling effect. But I think the benefits are worth it because of the ability to at least feel like I'm seeing who's speaking.
Yeah.
Hi,
Okay.
Paul. I'm the impromptu host. My name is Simon.
Hi, Simon.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise. Yeah, I got pulled into this last minute because they couldn't come.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is something that I
Yes.
noticed in other sessions where people don't realize that some of the mics are hot, are live, and and you can overhear conversations between the panelists. So just in future sessions, something to.
Yeah,
To
we're
think
having a
about.
big,
Don't say what you really think up there. They're chatting to each other.
Hi, Simon.
Hi,
Hi.
Simon. We can hear you very well.
Is this the hot mic?
Yes.
It is.
Great.
How did your session go, Simon?
It was perfect. Thank you.
Great. Great to hear.
The agenda's all organized here. How does this setup look? Is everything clear? I can see Sylvia here, which is interesting, and I guess I'm looking completely differently.
Yeah. Can you see yourself on the screen?
No, I just see. Oh, yeah, I think so.
There is a view there. So we see you
No,
on the
no,
front.
it's okay.
Nice to meet
As long
you.
as this works, that I'm standing here. Yeah, Nick. So I'll be
So it's
standing
nice to
here,
see you in
asking the
person.
questions here,
Yes.
and then Marlene will be over there for
Why
the
do we have to
Q&A.
come all the
That
way
sounds
here?
great. That sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
And well,
and Sylvia, you're in slide command, right?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
so we're going to go
You
fairly
are-
quick.
Just a quick question. Do they see only the ones who speak on the screen, or do they see us all together?
Is Jason, are you able to hear me? I was hoping to get the camera panned to the screen. So we
I
would
can
know.
hear you.
Would it be possible for you to pan the camera to the screen in the room so that we can at least see what is on that screen?
Just for a minute?
Yeah,
Not.
just briefly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it. Hold on.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, okay, thank you. I didn't know about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Sylvia.
It's one of the fix.
Okay.
Sylvia, you could share the slides now and then.
Oh yeah,
thing
good point.
as people enter. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that sounds great. I'll have a little look at that, and who knows, maybe something I might want to put there, and you might want to know it, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you.
I think that looks good, huh? Good. I mean, just. Do I stop sharing the screen or shall we leave it up, Rin?
Just leave it up. I just leave it up. Then people know they're in the right spot.
Good.
So just very brief, high-level summary of the order here. So we start with Simon welcoming everyone and starting the session. And then we move to Sylvia to do the more substantive introduction.
Yeah.
Correct? So hold on, I need to change my to gallery view so I can see everybody. I need about 8 more screens to really feel like I can see everything here. So Sylvia will introduce the session and the people, and then the Impact Scholar community, and then Sylvia will pass to me to talk about technical notes, the need for publishing impact work, and then I'll pass to Simon where we'll get into the meat of the session with the pairs, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sounds good.
Okay. Excellent.
Hi, I'm Christine.
Nick, is that the cue to start?
We have a couple more minutes before we need to start. Yeah, thank you though. At 3:59, the online folks will be able to start joining.
Maybe I was the only person that got time on because you know the original email.
Yeah, that's why she's.
I think there was some sort of miscommunication.
So Ren, everyone can hear me. Does that mean I need to read some dad jokes or something?
Because I've
Some
really
really
got this old school thing
horrible
going.
comic relief.
Critical things I
Right,
need to do.
right.
And I had it down for 2 o'clock, and I thought, hold on a minute,
Actually,
I've got the program.
when I saw your email, I was sort of panicked out.
Is the scheduling worse this
Yes, because the hybrid sessions, they spread over the whole 5 days. So 5 of my 6 sessions is today or today. So I was like, nothing on my Tuesday, and I think I just got enough.
Yeah, I'm glad because I didn't want to start like saying, well, what's this? We get the moment where I'm supposed to go walk around this nice city and enjoy myself. That hasn't been happening.
I'm just counting on the fact that I'll be freer later.
Somehow, so I don't, but we're hiring at the moment, so.
I'm also very.
So we should now see the online folks start to join.
Yeah. People are coming in. Maybe we can wait a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, we'll wait a minute or a couple minutes here for folks to filter in.
So quiet all of a sudden. It's a bit scary.
Yeah, I think without knowing how the audio really works, it's a little Still learning some of these practices. Okay, starting to get people filtering in through the online portal.
Yeah.
So it looks like that's working well. Simon, can you hear me?
Nick?
Yeah, I think we are ready to begin. We have people coming in through the online side, and it looks like we have folks in the room. So Simon, why don't you go ahead and kick us off, please?
So hello, everyone. Welcome to this awesome session on merging impact and rigorous research. So I'm a guest host because I could be here in person. And we're going to be trying out the new hybrid format here. So hopefully bear with us, but it looks like we've ironed out all the details and it should be a fantastic session. So I'll pass it over to Sylvia now to introduce and frame the discussion we'll be having.
All right. Thank you very much, Simon. Welcome, everyone, in the room and also virtually. So our session is called Publishing for Real-World Impact, Helping Engage Scholars Navigating the Publication Process. And as you can see, this is a session organized by the Impact Scholar community. It's our 10th event. And I would like to start with a brief overview of who we are actually as the Impact Scholar community before we move on with the actual panel discussion. So we just move on. So who we are, so it's me, Nicholas, and Ren. We are all three of us are online now, and we are the leadership team of the Impact Scholar community. And we are very thankful for Simon and Marlene to be in the room today. They are one of our Impact Scholar volunteers, and we are very thankful to have them. And yeah. And just a little bit of a brief overview. What is the Impact Scholar community? We are a community for early career scholars organized by early career scholars. We are very proud of this. And we have around 800 members already, and we exist for 2 years now. So it's quite an impressive achievement. And our goal is actually to move beyond the discussion of why we need research impact and what research impact actually is. Instead, we want to focus on the how. And this is especially important for early career scholars that want to have a career as impact scholars. So we keep this always in mind, that all our discussions have and focused on your career, and that you're successful as impact scholars. And we're trying to do this by give you really hands-on tools and approaches to conduct research with practitioners. And as you see in our session today, we always try to organize them a bit differently. So today we look at the publication process, but we not only want to hear from the editors, we actually also want to hear from the junior scholars that have published in these articles, because there are two sides of the story, and we always like to kind of unfold what's behind actual publication or what's behind the researcher. And we are hosted by the Academy of Management, by the ONE
division, and we also got great support from the Groningen Network, from RBM and MBS. So that's now, from our side as the Impact Scholar community. Just as a brief information, this is a hybrid event, so we really would like you, especially those that are joining online, make sure that you mute your microphones, and if you can, please turn on your video, that everyone in the room can see you, and that we get the sense of community which we are trying to build with the Impact Scholar community. And also we would invite you to ask a lot of questions and ask them ideally after the panel discussion. So we are very much interested in your participation. It's a kind of a community event. We always try to be a bit more informal, as you will see. So really make sure that you engage online or also in person with your questions. And if you have any problems, especially those on the other side here with me on the virtual space, please reach out to Nicholas and he will try to help you. Or if you're in the room, just raise your hand and we will try to address it. All right, let me pass on to Nicholas. He would like to explain a little bit more about why we picked that topic, actually.
Yeah, and could we go back one slide, Sylvia, just for a second? I think as we are all adjusting to this new hybrid environment, which has many wonderful benefits, we also have some challenges, and I think that it helps to be very explicit about how we're going to run things. So thank you for turning on video if you're in that situation that you can, and keeping your mic muted. I will be aggressive and muting people just as a warning because we don't want hot mics coming through. The chat box will be used for comments and questions. Please enter those as we go through the presentations, and I will be monitoring that. And then when we get to the Q&A, I'll raise some of those questions. I'll allow you to ask your questions to the panelists as well. And as Sylvia said, if you're in the room, please raise your hand, jot down questions that you might want to ask during the conversation. Okay, next slide, Sylvia, thank you. So why are we doing this? We think that that work has impact if people outside academia are reading it and using it in their work and practice. There have been quite a few sessions already on impact at this AOM. So this isn't the only definition, but that's kind of the one that we're working from here. Producing that work is one of the two justifications for academic research. The other is kind of this idea of basic research. We have a long history in management of producing what might be called that basic research that's just building theory and explanation about things. And we have a long history of debating if we need more work with impact or applied work, stretching all the way back to the 1970s and then the 1990s with Hambrick's kind of notorious presidential address about how the academy works. Here in the impact scholar community, we're driven by the belief that we need some more applied work to fulfill that purpose of academic research and satisfy the public trust we're given to be a self-governing community. And what we're doing here today is really supporting early career researchers who want to do this kind of work, who want to connect their work to having impact. And we're going to hear from a wonderful panel of editors and authors about work that they've done that satisfies some of these ideals of having impact. I'll now send it over to Simon to begin our panel discussion with those wonderful folks who have joined us today. So thank you.
Awesome. So as Nick mentioned, now we're going to have a 30-minute session where we'll be talking with editor-scholar pairs, and I'll explain what the questions will be like. So it'll be half an hour. Please hold any questions you have for the next phase, which Marlene will be shepherding us through in the future. And like just how Nick has to be a bit tough with the muting, I was given the task to be tough with the timing for individual speakers as well, just to make sure that the 30 minutes can be allocated equitably among everyone for all the questions, especially since we have two participants participating virtually. So in terms of the author pairs we have, so from the team strategic organization, we have Paula Jarzbowkowski and Konstantinos Chalkias, who's joining us online. And then we have from team ASQ, we have Christine Beckman and Christine Bode. And then from team Business and Society, we have Colin Higgins and Jung-Hoon Park, both of which are here with us. So the first question will be, we have allocated 7 minutes to this question. So this one is for the junior scholars. So you have about 2 minutes-ish for your initial remarks. So first off, if you could just introduce yourselves and what your project and your passions are. And then the main question is, when you were writing up your paper, did you highlight the impact aspect as a strength or a main contribution of paper? And if not, you can maybe explain what your thought process was there. So we'll start that off, and we'll start in person with Jung-Hoon.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Simon. My name is Jung-Hoon Park. I'm a PhD candidate in management at Baruch College, City University, New York. Just as a joke, as a sort of genuine remark, I'm on the job market. So if you're interested in me, just let me know. My experience with journal Business and Society began with the publication of a literature review study as part of the journal's 60th anniversary special issue, which is at the intersection of business and public health or / human health. So we basically collect the management and then like business society studies for like 3 decades to see what's been out there in terms of the impact of business activities on the health of external stakeholders, because there are a bunch of studies for occupational health and safety issues, but not many studies about like the health of external stakeholders, such as local community members and then consumers. So that's how I sort of tap into this kind of impact. So in our paper, we sort of emphasize how can we actually measure the impact of business activities on the health of external stakeholders? How can we evaluate the measurement of this like corporate health initiatives, for instance? So we sort of try to emphasize that kind of impact part. And at the same time, we also emphasize the importance of interdisciplinary studies, because we had to take a look at public health literatures and then like global health literatures a lot. And then we also had to reach out to public health scholars to confirm and to verify our research ideas. So I consider that as a kind of impact, because we try to make bridges with public health scholars, because we always talk about interdisciplinary studies important aspects, but we sort of haven't done it yet. So I believe that with the paper, we try to make an impact. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So now we will proceed. Konstantinos, the floor is yours, 2 minutes. Just a brief introduction and then dive right into the topic.
Simon, we don't have your mic. Yeah, we'll need to be switching between mics, I guess. Simon, is your mic on?
You tell me.
Is the handheld mic for the audience on that you could use?
We just need a second.
Simon, can you yell really loud?
Hello, can you hear me now? Hello?
No.
A little bit. I think we heard enough that Constantino is going to get started. So maybe we'll just flip over to Constantino and they can figure out the mic in the room.
That sounds great.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you, Constantino.
No worries. Very, very happy to be virtually with you, although I'm really sorry I couldn't be there in person. So the paper we'll use today for today's discussion is the first paper that came out of a big piece of research we started back in 2016 with Paula and a few other co-investigators. And just to give you a bit of context, our research project essentially focuses on how markets and governments across the world work together in different ways to address what we saw as a grand challenge, and that grand challenge we call the insurance protection gap. Now, what is the insurance protection gap? Just very, very quickly, so that you understand what this research is about. It is essentially the gap between the actual economic losses caused by a disaster like a flood or an earthquake and the amount of these losses that are actually insured. So in simple words, the insurance protection gap refers to the uninsured losses that come after a disaster. And why it's important to study the insurance protection gap is first because the majority of disaster losses are actually uninsured. And second, because of climate change, the insurance protection gap is something which is growing. The paper that I'm going to be talking about was the first paper that came out of this big piece of research. It was published back in 2019 in Strategic Organization, and it's co-authored as a team paper with among all of the 4 co-investigators on this project, including Paula, before she became the editor at the journal. It's called Exploring Interorganizational Paradoxes, Methodological Lessons from a Study of a Grand Challenge. And it essentially gave us an opportunity to talk about the methodological insights we had by studying this project, and essentially explain how we and how other researchers can study a grand challenge through paradox theory lens when moving from one organizational to an interorganizational and systemic level. We chose the strategic organization because the journal, in addition to the regular articles, it also encourages the submission of an essay type of paper. I think Paula will probably talk more about that. Now, in terms of how it is connected to impact, and I want to be honest and quite blunt here and say that I do not consider the paper or any paper we wrote or write to be directly part of our impact story, in the sense that I would not envision our research participants going to strategic organization or AMJ and reading our academic papers. But is our research project impactful? I would say very much so, and we can discuss later, I guess, if we have a chance, how we do this. But having said that, I believe that working on impact enables us to write better papers, and writing papers also enable us to have better impact. So for me, working for impact and writing papers is something which is quite synergetic in a sense. So the one helps the other. And to just to finish, I'd like to borrow some words from the paradox theory, the research area I belong to, and I believe that working for impact and publishing papers, although it can be two separate activities, they are not in an either-or type of relationship, but more in a both-and type of relationship, as the one strengthens the other. That's for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Konstantinos. So I realized I messed up the order a tiny bit, so I think I jumped into a question for you too early, Jung-hoon. So we'll jump back to that. But getting back on track, for Christine, I'm wondering if you could start off by just introducing the paper, its connection to impact, whether impact was an initial goal when you started your project, and why you chose to submit the particular journal you did.
Okay, you mean Christiana, right? Me, as opposed to Christine?
You?
We're Christiana pair, so it's tricky.
Sorry, Christiana.
Okay, perfect. I'm just making sure. Yeah, so I'm Christiana Bodhi, and I'm an assistant professor at Imperial College here in London. I am in London. It's getting dark, so the lights are coming on here. So the paper that we're going to be discussing is actually one of a series. So sort of very briefly, the question we're asking in the paper is doing social good for one's career? And sort of in terms of background, we'd already been working on projects looking at how participation in this kind of socially impactful work affects employees. So we've been looking at retention, we've been looking at the motivation of why people want to do that. And then so in this paper, we switched and we started looking at, right, so employee promotion is kind of this pivotal shift, because now you're not looking at how the organization benefits, but you're kind of looking at how the organization reacts to people taking part in that kind of work. So then the question was, did we highlight the impact? So I mean, the context is, right, social impact work, sort of the kind of volunteer work people do for X amount of time. So that context was there. I think the social impact sort of was there in terms of, the effect it has on people's careers in terms of biases, how those came in, because it turns out it's not good for everyone. In particular, it's not good for men necessarily. Sorry, guys. But it's not all bad. We can get back to that. And so we were actually really kind of worried about whether this paper is really narrow in the sense that it's just quote unquote like looking at CSR type activities, and whether we should therefore really target it at kind of a specialist journal, or whether it did have broader implications and in terms of what we can learn about organizations, in terms of legitimacy of practices, in terms of gender bias, just kind of practice implementation in general. And so for us, sort of for us, the Holy Grail, and I must say I have two excellent co-authors, one of which had published at ASQ before, and she said, no, I think that the idea here is ultimately big enough. I think we can, right, there is an impact, but it's sort of, yeah, I guess it's not really sort of a separate thing, right? Yes, there is a small community that people really care about CSR, but then there is sort of the bigger story. We think it's in there somewhere. Now, it turns out it took a long time to dig it out, but hopefully we did ultimately manage to dig it out. Was there a second part to that question?
No, we'll get to the second part shortly, but that was perfect. Thank you, Christiana. So now we'll jump to our editor panel. So we'll start with Colin, then Paula, then Christine. So maybe if you can just take 1 to 2 minutes to introduce your journal and what impact means to you at your journal. And we'll do about 2 minutes each.
All right. Thank you. So Colin Higgins, one of the co-editors of Business and Society. So what does impact mean to us? Well, we have spent a lot of time talking about this and thinking about this over the last couple of years in the term of the current editors. And essentially impact for us is anything beyond publication metrics. So to what extent does the work that we do, the work that we solicit, the work that we publish and the work that we encourage have some impact on the questions that matter in terms of the social good? I guess we've got something a little bit easier in terms of the scope of the journal. It is about business and society. So we do get a lot of work challenging and questioning a lot of the grand challenges that we have at the time. So climate change, modern slavery, and we have leadership aspirations to be leading the debate around some of that. In terms of, do you want me to go into how we go about fostering that yet, or?
No, at this stage, just cap it off. What impact means to you at your journal, and then we'll dive into the details in the next round.
So hopefully that pretty much covers it. Anything beyond publication, citations, and metrics at this stage? More to say later.
And Paula, will transition to you now.
Okay, I'm Paula Jazubkowski. I'm a co-editor at Strategic Organization. I hope I'm not drifting in and out for those of you online. So Strategic Organization has a couple of distinctive features. One is it's a journal at the nexus of strategy and organization. So we saw that as something that wasn't being fulfilled by the journals. And secondly, it's a one review only journal. So we like a paper that's been well workshopped. And, if it gets through a good first round of reviews, it will, so it'll go out, you'll get your reviews. If we think you can work with it, you'll get a revision and it'll be looked at again by the reviewers, but then the editor will make a decision and the editor will work with you if we believe it can go forward to publication. So it puts a lot of onus on us as editors to really think about the reviews before we send out that first review and whether we can help this person to get there. And then sometimes if you get a conditional from us, there will be quite a few conditions. But it does also give us a chance as editors to shape the journal. In terms of impact, I wouldn't say that we've set ourselves up around impact, depending how you define that. We are interested in the theoretical contribution, or I'm the essays editor, so we are interested in the provocation to a field in the essays. So an essay should provoke in that sense. So it's not, would a practitioner pick up our journal and read it? But we are very interested in things that are provoking the field. And we find that increasingly those things are things about inequality, things about challenges and so forth. We did recently have a special issue on sustainability in which we had a number of authors. Again, we weren't evaluating for impact, but authors were talking about, how do we get this better results in our scholarship that can be more useful to the world. So I think that's probably enough to introduce the journal. We do have a special issue coming out on impact, but I'll talk about that later.
Christine, 2 minutes on the clock for you.
Does this one work? Yeah, it does. Okay, perfect. Then we can share a bit. I'm Christine Beckman. I'm the editor of ASQ. I think we're a journal probably known more for theory and developing theory than impact. But our information to contributors says our goal is to publish the best and potentially most impactful research in the field of organizations. So impact is something we care about and think about. We maybe define it a little more broadly than you did on the opening slide, Sylvia. But we participate in the RBM initiative, sort of the responsible research in business and management that you also mentioned, and I'll sort of highlight sort of some of the principles they talk about that I think we all subscribe to. One is seeking to improve the credibility and usefulness of management research, service to society, valuing plurality and multidisciplinary collaboration, which was already talked about today, and sound methodology. And so we think about those as all important for the papers that we publish.
Thank you so much. So just to give the audience a heads up for what the next 3 sets of questions will be. So the next one will be back to the scholars, and it will be just a question about how impact was framed. So I know I preempted that a little bit with Jung-Hoon, and I'm sorry about that, but maybe if you wanted, you could expand on how you initially presented and framed the impact of your paper when crafting it up, whether it was as a strength or a contribution, and what your rationale was for that choice and the way you did it. And so we'll start 1 or 2 minutes with Jung-Hoon, then we'll go with Konstantinos, and then we'll go with Christiana.
Thank you, Simon. So as I already sort of briefly discussed, I saw the main contributions of that business and society paper at the intersection of business and human health was to build bridges between management scholars or business scholars and then public health scholars. So for instance, public health scholars, normally they have a very negative stance against the business practices. Basically, businesses are evil. So they just ruin the order of public health across the globe. But meanwhile, business scholars sort of have some belief that business can generate some positive externalities on our society. So in that regard, we just try to sort of reduce the gaps between what business scholars pursue and then what public health scholars pursue, and then how can we help each other in our papers. So when you check out our papers concluding remark and the discussion part, we sort of try to build on our findings to talk about how to build bridges between the two different fields. And then we also talk about how management scholars can collaborate with other like business scholars, including marketing, like business communication, or like operations management, because we do a sort of different work, but there is some connection that we can sort of build on to come up with some solutions to this, the grand challenges of human health. So that's how we sort of frame our contribution.
Thank you so much. Konstantinos, over to you, 1 to 2 minutes.
Yeah, so again, I mean, picking up from what I said before, I guess when we wrote this paper and other papers we've published from this research, I wouldn't say that, you know, when we wrote this paper, we had practical impact in mind, in the sense of, you know, this is the part of the paper where we now structure and we write about impact. Reading our paper and our context more specifically, you could definitely see that this is coming from a research that is trying to kind of like have impact in that sense. But again, I wouldn't say that, you know, after you reading our paper, you would definitely have a very clear view about how we did and how we created impact. There is definitely, and that's part of what we do as researchers, and something I enjoy myself is the work that comes during, but also sometimes after you've written a paper, that you need to do kind of like demystify and translate our papers into some sort of digestible insights. Because as I said before, I wouldn't, you know, envision a research participant from our project going through our paper, you know, reading our literature reviews, you know, our findings and our theoretical contributions, and really enjoying and asking for more. But having said that, I think it's an integral part of us, you know, kind of developing our research ideas, and it's definitely, at least for me and for our research team, it was an integral part of us understanding and delving deeper into the research problem and helping us translate that into practical insights that we use to have impact in the field.
Thank you so much. And Christiana will give you the next 2 minutes on the same question, how you framed and presented impact in your submission.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I just pulled up this is the nice thing about being hybrid. I just quickly pulled up the first submission. So for us, I mean, we'd gotten bolder, I think, over time, because like I said, we'd worked on sort of projects before that. And the first project we ever submitted on this was basically framed as human capital. And oh, wouldn't it be fun to understand how socially impactful things affect human capital, right? So this submission was different. So this paper was different. So even in the first submission, I think the intro paragraph was, look, this is really important phenomenon. You know, there are all kinds of things we know about it, you know, just sort of like framed on the phenomenon. So we hadn't done that before. So we did sort of put that into the sort of upfront. And in terms of contribution, we didn't. So we tried really in the first submission to say, okay, we have a broad contribution, to be that about gender, be that about legitimacy. And actually, because as I said before, we were kind of worried it's too narrow. Otherwise, you know, this is not gonna, you know, fly. And we actually got in the first round, and I guess I'm jumping ahead here, but we ended up getting the feedback being like, look, make a strong contribution in this context, right? And help us understand how things work in this context. Don't worry about, right? You're not going to change the way we think about legitimacy. There are a lot of things we know about it. This paper is not going to be the one that changes that. So, so yes, we framed on the what we thought was sort of the impactful aspect of it, but in terms of contributions, we were quite sort of careful in terms of not highlighting that so much until a little bit later.
Thank you so much, Christiana. So now we'll go to the second batch of questions to our editor panel. And so to the editor team, you had already discussed your journal and what impact means to your journal. And now we would like you to get a little bit more specific about how you as an individual editor, how you kind of seek to make sense of and evaluate impact when you do your editorial work. So we'll start with Colin, then Paula, and then Christine. You have about 2 minutes or so.
Great, thanks. And I think one way of approaching this question is in part to think about the role of the journal in the impact conversation. And some of the work that we've done early on in our term was commissioned the new commentaries piece, which was designed to be about providing quicker, more engaging and more direct conversations about issues that are important at the time. And when we developed that approach, the first issue of our commentaries was about impact. So we actually engaged with the community to help us to figure out what impact would look like for the journal. And in terms of how that feeds back to the question that was posed, that has enabled us to take a step back and say, what is the most appropriate format and what is the most appropriate avenue and channel for publishing this piece of work that comes to us? We don't think necessarily that journals need to pivot away from their developing theory aspirations and that or commitments. Theory is very, very important, and the contribution to theory is very, very important. But journals do have a bigger role to play in that broader ecosystem. So when we evaluate a paper that does come to us, we will be thinking about two things. One is, does this make a theoretical contribution? If so, how will we nurture that paper through that form of impact that the journal can have? Or is there another format that we have within our stable, the new commentaries, for example, that might be a more appropriate avenue for the journal to work with this author, with this piece, to have some kind of other impact beyond just the theoretical contribution?
Paula, over to you.
Okay, so I wouldn't say that impact is the thing that I'm looking for. It's journal, and I'm looking for science. And I think that we should all respect that good impact is going to come from good science. And to talk about that, for example, we've just been through a global pandemic. I think most of us would prefer high quality science sitting behind the injections that we've taken and the treatments that we've developed. So yes, they've got huge impact, but I want to know the science behind them was good, not just that a bunch of people got together and said, hey, do this. And that does worry me a tiny bit in business when we talk about impact. What I mean by impact is good quality science, which then can also be relayed to practitioners as a way to rethink the world, rather than we already have a lot of management consultants out there telling people what to do. Why are we different? Because we first established the quality of the science. So that matters to me very much. That said, I am interested in interesting problems, provocative problems, important problems. And when I'm looking at a paper, I will think, okay, do we already have a lot on this? Is this going to say something? When it comes back and it's that first review back, I've got to make a decision. Can we get this through in one review? How much am I going to be doing to help this author get through this? And as part of that, if it's an important problem, and mostly impactful problems or important problems, interesting problems, then I'll really want to help you to make it into good science. So, but I do want you to understand, I think this is what Konstantinos was saying as well. We don't sit there saying, let's write papers that practitioners will now read and go and do different things, because science isn't written that way. But if it's an important problem, good science will help to change the world.
I think a lot of that's actually pretty consistent with our RBM mission around, good science and impactful research. So I would certainly agree with you on that. And also, I think about, is it important? Is it interesting? Have I learned something that I didn't know? And reading the reviews and looking at the commonalities across that, both people that are very, know that context as well as more general readers. I think what happens at ASQ is we get a lot of dissertation research, which we're really proud of. We publish, 40 to 50% of our papers are dissertation based that we publish. And I think that means two things. It means that young scholars are more likely to be doing and interested in making an impact, I would say, and I think that your community sort of speaks to that as well. And so I think by almost because of the fact that we're attractive to dissertation work, we get a lot of research of people interested in those things, studying contexts and phenomenon that are important to the world, to society. And so they have rich data, they're important problems, and so those are papers we really like to work with and help develop. So I would sort of focus on those aspects.
Awesome, thank you so much. So now we'll transition to our third set of questions and hopefully have a little bit more of a dialogue between the pair about what the interaction was like and how discussions via, I guess, email or Scholar One in this case around impact played out. So we'll start with our business and society team, and we'll start with the scholar, the submitting author first, and then turn over to the editor and then have a bit of a discussion about that. So Jung-Hoon, starting with you, from your point of view, what was the interaction like between you and the editor, and how did you see questions of impact evolve throughout the process?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Simon. So as part of the 60th anniversary special issue at the journal, so actually we began by submitting our proposal first so that our sort of topic regarding the connection between business and health sort of got partially approved, but we had to prove that it is worthwhile pursuing for our management scholarship and business and society scholarship. So when we submitted our initial version of manuscript, we got an R&R, and then one of the co-editors back then, Harry Bapuzzi, sort of pushed us to think through how actually this has some implication for management scholars, because although like we all probably acknowledge that human health, public health matters across any different countries, but in terms of like science, as Paula pointed out, maybe we had to sort of provide theoretical implications. So that was a sort of first part that we had to go through in terms of the major comments, and then we addressed it by like drawing on the framework for like addressing grand challenges from Georgia Academic Management Journal paper. So that's how we sort of made progress in our paper going forward, going through the process. So I guess that could be my answer.
Colin, over to you if you can beat the honking.
Yeah, not sure what that alarm is all about. Must be from the parking lot here, I think. But yeah, and look, the paper that Jung-Hoon talked about was part of the collection of papers that Business and Society published for the 60th anniversary special issue last year or earlier this year, and so that had quite a different lens about impact. It was more about the field. It was more about understanding the field. Where has the field come from? What is the role now of scholarship in business and society when the journal had come from a position from the outside challenging business organisations? And so the special issue was specifically about looking back, reflecting where we've come from and where we are now, and looking forward from there. So the process between the editors and the reviewers and the authors in that space was very much around opening up new avenues, opening up new possibilities, looking forward to shape more of that ecosystem that journals play going forward. So it was somewhat different to, I think, what we would have undertaken as a normal review process, because we had a very specific lens in mind for these 60th anniversary papers. We wanted some breadth, but we also wanted to tell the story and narrate the transition that had occurred over the previous 60 years with scholarship around business and society.
And Colin, you mentioned reviewers also being a key kind of participant in this process. So I'm wondering, if either of you wants to comment on the reviewers' feedback around impact and how you navigated that, if it did come up.
I think probably consistent with the other editor panelists here, it's not something that we specify. It's not something that's front and center of the review process. I think we have a very dedicated pool of reviewers that understand the philosophy of the journal very well and what the expectations are of the journal. But the reviewers are there to provide the editor with guidance, not to provide necessarily the specification of what should be published or shouldn't publish, but it's about a closer reading of the theory, the philosophy, the methodology, the findings, the conclusions, etc. So it isn't something that is specified as part of the review process, and it wouldn't form a big part of the decision around impact. That would be something more that the editors, I think, would hold around the vision that they're attempting to realise with the paper at that point in time.
Jung-Hoon, did you have any comments on the reviewers' feedback and how you may have navigated that together with Colin?
Sure. I mean, just as an author of that paper, I was curious who are those three reviewers, because this is a sort of new topic. I mean, the reviewers' comments were really sort of really good, and it was very constructive, and they helped shape our paper better. But at the same time, are these public health scholars? Maybe not. Are they management scholars or business and society scholars? So that's sort of the question that I had in mind. But in any case, they sort of try to understand what we were trying to achieve through that paper. Basically, try to see what was the past at the intersection of business and health, where are we heading to, and then what will be the future. So that's how we sort of structure our paper. And then all the three anonymous reviewers help us build up that structure. So that's what I can tell about my paper.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Colin and Jung-Hoon. So now we're going to transition to team strategic organization. So we'll start with Konstantinos. And again, the question here is just what was your perspective on the interaction with the editor in this case? And if you have any thoughts on that interaction vis-a-vis impact, and if reviewers somehow came into the mix as well. So wide open for you to share any reflections.
Yeah, with the risk of being a little bit repetitive and I hope not annoying, I'll emphasize again that, during the reviewing process, I wouldn't say that we had comments or suggestions in terms of how we did impact or how do we navigate impact, but indirectly I'd say that our editor back at the time, she was quite instrumental in bringing our context a little bit more alive in the paper. So when we actually wrote it, I remember the first submission, it was our context and how we actually did that in practice for our specific ground challenge was not that much in the front, and through the reviewing process and particularly the feedback from the editor, we kind of brought that a lot more alive in the paper. So the actual context of how we did it for that specific ground challenge, what were those three methodological ways of analyzing data, how did we do it specifically for our ground challenge. So the context was brought way more to the front during the reviewing process, and I'd say that helps a lot, not just for the paper to be more interesting, but also, to kind of focus more on the context, which I think it's something which indirectly at least has a lot of it's very interesting when you're trying to talk about something which is quite important challenge that we face and which is very much relatable to practical work.
And if I can just ask a quick follow-up question. So you mentioned that the editor's role was instrumental in this case, and I'm wondering, to the extent that you feel comfortable sharing, what was the interaction like specifically, and how did it bring about that instrumental role?
Yeah, I mean, it was, building up on the reviewer comments, and, it was kind of I'd say a suggestion or urging us kindly to do that, and through the reviewing process, through the feedback that we received, the editor did that, and we took that on board. And to be honest with you, I think if you go through and read the paper, you'll see that it made it better because we have the methodological tools that everybody can use in their own research, but then we have little pieces below it of those analytical techniques that we kind of project and use that in our own grand challenge, and how did it work for us. And I think that was very helpful, and for people who read the paper, it would be very helpful because they can sort of understand and potentially project how they could do it themselves.
Awesome, thank you so much. Paula, I'm wondering if you could share your perspectives on the interaction and reviewers and impact.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a little difficult in that I was an author on this paper, not an editor on this paper, in so much as this is the teamwork we do. And I think we're pretty well known for impact in my team. We've submitted 2 impact cases for the Research Excellence Framework in the last, since the UK has had those from these work. But I think so. But I also sit on the other side of that now as an editor, and I think the thing that's distinctive about strategic organization is this role that editors can take, and we found that with this paper. In that one of the comments that came back, and this is what the editor had extrapolated from what was being said by the reviewers, which is, it's great to see that you're paying attention and finding systematic ways to study things that are complex without oversimplifying them. And these grand challenges are indeed that. And actually, that is something we found with the next paper we've published from this data, the next in the series that we're publishing from these data, which is that it's very encouraging that editors are saying, actually, I want you to simplify it enough that we can understand what your theoretical contribution is, or what are the key 3 things you want to take away methodologically in this strategic organization paper, but I don't want you to render the world simple, because the problems you are studying are not simple. The problems that we want to be able to study and that people can take away from your work will not be simple. So we want you to be able to describe, and I think that for me was a key feature of this, that the editor was very hands-on about that. And when we got it back, so that was first review. When we got it back, we then had a pretty strong conditional still, but it was taking us more down that route of, we want to know what the context is, because then we can extrapolate from that why these 3 things will help people who are both interested in that context, which might be an interesting one for management scholars to study. It's not a well-known one, although it has enormous economic and social consequences when it doesn't, when it's not happening. And the other thing is, many people are studying problems like this, and this will be helpful if you can make it clearer, those 3 conditions that will render these things more salient. So I think that was really the critical thing for us, that the editor was hands-on and helpful.
Awesome. So now we'll go to our final pair in this case. So Christiana, we'll start with you. If you can just share your reflections on the interaction with the editor, any role impact played, and any role reviewer process played as well.
Sure. Yeah. So I think for us, I want to sort of echo, I think what Paula said just earlier, right? So we clearly went into this being sort of aware that without rigor, there wouldn't be any, like the sort of idea that without rigor, there is no impact in general. And I think for us, it was really clear that, that was sort of going to be a big part, like how convincingly rigorous was our work going to be in the end. And then of course, the idea being, well, if you then also have an interesting problem, then you combine that with rigor, you should be, you shouldn't sort of need a leg up, like that should be enough, right? And so that's basically how the review process played out. So we submitted a paper, and again, like I said, we almost downplayed a little bit what we thought the impactful aspects perhaps were. And then we got a very clear sort of direction back in the first revision saying, look, and it was very high risk, but it was saying, no, if you're going to be successful in this revision, you're going to have to tell us more how this phenomenon, these kind of the socially impactful work type of stuff works, right? How to make that beneficial or not to employees, right? That I'm kind of reading, that was actually the comment we got. So really tell us in your context how things are going to work. And specifically, we're told, yes, what you're telling us in terms of mechanisms is plausible, but go out and actually test them. Yes, you have an interesting data set, but it's not enough. Tell us, look, go find another one, basically. So it was very much, so we're given kind of the directive, like, you have permission to study the phenomenon, but you better do that really, really well in terms of up your rigor and also, clean up your argument because they sort of right align the empirics with the theory, and that ended up taking, I think, at least 3 rounds to get there, but we got there. So yeah, I mean, that was that sort of that's what you were looking for. There was the second part of that question.
Yeah, just if in terms of if you're thinking about the interactions you had with the editor, like any kind of more nuanced details you could share about how impact came out through those 3 revisions you mentioned, or if any specific reviewer comments touched on impact that you wrestled with.
So our reviewers, we never spoke about impact. It never came up explicitly in the review process. It was really just sort of like I said, we had this permission, right? Study phenomenon and do, everything you can to study it well. And that's, that was how the impact was, gonna be. Our reviewers were, I'd love to know who they are, but of course I don't. So our reviewers were very clearly not only very strong in methods, but also knew the literature around, in our case, sort of the corporate social volunteering, corporate social responsibility, and a socially impactful work by companies, sort of knew it really well. So they definitely nudged us to be careful the way we developed our theoretical arguments in line with that. So again, impact as a term, it was never something that really was brought up, but it just sort of, we were pushed to kind of, situate ourselves in sort of to really push the knowledge frontier within that context, I would say.
Great, thank you so much, Christine.
So I guess I'll just reiterate a little bit on the, so I think in the first round, the empirical finding was interesting and provocative, right? That men were being penalized for engaging in this social responsibility work in a way that women weren't. And I think that was provocative, but also we weren't convinced, right? I mean, I think is this only true in this one company? Why is this true? And so really trying to understand the how was really where I think we pushed, and required collecting more data. I mean, there was a lot of work that was being asked of them. And I think I would say it was important for me as an editor, both for theoretical reasons, because, you want to be careful about what you claim, but also because of impact, because of how provocative the finding was. I mean, I wouldn't say it's more important, it's always important, but, we really better make sure this is right, because this is something that could, you're going to read about it in the press, and I don't want to be publishing something that we don't really know how and why that kind of effect happens, because it could be used in ways that aren't at all what Christiane and her team meant. So I think I would sort of just point out that when you're doing high impact work, that sound methodology, it's not that it goes away, and in some sense it's even more important because we're speaking to outside of our community, and we better be sure that we know what we're talking about. And so I think really pushing them to really do that. They did an experiment, they did and then a lot of work was around the empirics. Actually, it wasn't really about developing the theoretical contribution, was just making sure that they could really explain and adjudicate why was this happening, and how to explain it in a way that was compelling to the reviewers.
Thank you. And Marlene, do we still have a couple minutes for the rapid fire fourth question? I saw the text, but I wasn't able to respond. So we had one secret question. Since we were so good at working through the time, we just wanted to spend maybe 1 minute per each of our 6 panelists, just to get your reflections on what you as individual scholars or representatives of journals are doing after the publication process to connect published work to practice, whether through mobilization or translation efforts. So Colin, maybe we'll start with you. You can put on any hat you want and just share what you're up to in that space.
So I think I think very quickly, Business and Society has a very active Twitter feed, Twitter community. We have the blog pages, and we're involved in dissemination through social media. We push stuff out to journalists that we're aware of. So attempting to take that work that does have the theoretical rigor and push it through different channels for different audiences.
Jung-hoon?
Yes, so as a PhD student, as a junior scholar, what I have done with that certain publication, I have taught management society at the undergraduate level in my institution. So actually I try to incorporate a couple of slides based on my research finding from the business and society paper, so that I can sort of disseminate what we found in terms of business and human health connections to my students. Also, my advisor taught executive MBA program in healthcare administration. So already all the students who attended that course was healthcare administration practitioners, but they had no idea about sort of big picture, health challenges, such as how climate change could have some health impact on people, but how business sort of play a role in that regard. So we sort of also introduced the same ideas based on our research findings, and then I guess that's sort of how we could make an impact based on our research.
And Jung-hoon, was that in a particular class you shared those findings to those students?
Yes, I mean, there was a course for special issues for global business and sustainability. So my advisor sort of covered, because it was for executive MBA in healthcare administration. So that's why we sort of disseminate the information to that course.
Thank you so much, Paula, and then Christine.
Okay, so I'll let Konstantinos talk about how we've used the paradox lens in practice and with practitioners for impact. But from the perspective of the journal, I think it's something that we're trying to get to grips with right now. We're actually having our meeting here on Monday, and looking at maybe bringing someone on as our social media editor, because we think it's something that we want to do more of to support our authors. We have actually negotiated with Sage that part of our stuff is open access. A lot of our stuff can be open access for a month afterwards, after it's been published, or special issues. We have an open access methods collection, and we think we're not doing enough to make that available. And as part of that, some of it may be people wanting to maybe do a little 2 to 3 page, 2 to 3 minute, 2 to 3, pages slide type video of some sort on here's the key theoretical take home, here's the key practical take home from this. So I think we're trying to get to grips with that because we see it as important. I wouldn't say we do it well yet, but watch this space and help us by retweeting us. Thanks.
Christine?
We don't go to the authors, it's just the journal.
No, we'll just go.
Okay, terrific. So many of the same things. So we have a social media editor, and Amy sort of tweets out threads of every paper when it comes online. Retweet us too. It's hard. We have a wonderful student blog that interviews authors and sort of talks about various parts of the process. It's really about just trying to increase visibility for the work. I've done some virtual special issues, sort of things that papers that have been published in the past, sort of around a topic. So we did one, for example, around Women's History Month. What do we know about gender discrimination and equality, and trying to put all of those papers together and write an introduction to sort of draw more attention to that work. We also, try and submit our papers to the awards that are coming out. So Financial Times has a new impact award. We had 2 runners up for that award. The RBM has been doing awards for the last 4 years, and we're always proud to have a winner in their award. So it's trying to get visibility for the papers that are out there through blogs, through tweeting, and through getting other people to do it, trying to support authors. But it's hard. It's definitely hard to do it well.
And Konstantinos, what are your existing or planned strategies for post-publication impact?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be a little bit more. I'll challenge that a little bit in the sense that we a lot of the times we discuss about impact post-publication, but we have to take into consideration that to actually have a publication is going to take a lot of time. Sometimes in the best ranked journals it takes years, and sometimes that happens quite a long time after we have exited the field. And I would like to challenge that in the sense that impact is not something that only, of course, it happens through translating your published work, and we do that a lot. We write small pieces that we share with the companies. We write small pieces that we try to translate our own, findings from the published work. But there is a lot also happening before and during the publication process. A lot of that happening during collecting data as well. You need to take advantage of the fact that when you are with somebody and when you still are in the field, you have these connections which are live in a sense, and you need to kind of take that advantage and do a lot of the impact work during that while you still haven't fully published all your work. And you can do that through, and we've done that, what Paula mentioned about the paradox lens. With one of the many organizations that we were studying for this project, they were facing something that we have kind of identified as a paradox, what we call a paradox in paradox theory. And it was very funny seeing them trying to kind of resolve that in the sense, which is something which paradox theory says, you cannot always, and you cannot actually resolve a paradox. It's something you need to manage. It's something which is always going to be there. And we kind of introduced them to that theory, and we made a presentation to them explaining how it works and how that kind of projects onto their everyday work. And it was actually very satisfying to see them emotionally and practically also, taking something out of it, making something out of it. It helped them emotionally and practically manage their daily work in a more, not productive, but in a more efficient way, let's say. So yeah, I would say when we work on, just to sum up, when we work on impact, is not only post publication, it's an ongoing process, which for most of us happens from the time you start entering a field to the time you exit it and beyond, because you kind of like shape people even through interviewing them.
Great, and Christiana will give you the last minute on your thoughts on kind of the post-publication process and mobilizing your insights.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think I do enough of it, frankly. I think it is, I find it very difficult, right? Because it's hard. I mean, sometimes you get lucky and something gets picked up. So we had the Stanford Social Innovation Review, want to write a little piece, sort of a little journalistic article on ours. And of course, that was the ASQ student blog. Then I think the most sort of in terms of disseminating the knowledge, I think it is through teaching. I teach an MBA class on sustainability and competitive advantage, what it's entitled. I teach a bunch of other classes where I can, bring it in. And so I now have from all my papers, I have sort of tried to distill the more interesting findings, like just like around one little graph or something, and just sort of bring it in there. And, I think those, people do go out and then, go back into the world and hopefully take some of that with them. We've been thinking about putting together a sort of an HBR or some kind of practitioner piece, not just on this paper, but sort of pulling together a bunch of our work on sort of a similar topic. Yeah, we haven't done it because it is also it's quite hard to get the hook there in terms of making it sort of approachable for that different audience, but at the same time not making it interesting enough sort of that HBR would pick it up, for example. So we're thinking about lots of things, haven't necessarily done them.
Well, thank you to all 6 of you for sharing your initial reflections and experiences in these prepared kind of questions. And now Marlene's going to lead us through a Q&A as well to be able to hear from all of you.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you to our great panelists for the good discussion so far. For the Impact Scholar community, the community is really, really important. That's why we also want to have enough time for questions from the audience, and how we are going to do it, because we are hybrid. We'll take questions from the in-person audience and from the hybrid audience, alternating. And I suggested we start with questions that you might have. Is there anyone? Please. If you have a question, can I ask you to come up to the microphone and then speak towards the camera so that the we facilitated
try
the
to
cameras in the
balance
back.
to balance towards the panel and the camera so we know who you are, and introduce yourself. Thank you.
That works?
Yes, thank you.
Well, my name is Jorge Rivera. I'm a professor at George Washington. Well, I have a comment and a question. So I think the word impact was repeated like, what, 500 times? But we don't know what it is. The closest we came to was impact is scientific rigor. No, I think that's, I was trying to pay attention, but I spaced out after a while. So how do we define impact? For real, not instead of dancing around it. Is impact a theoretical contribution that gets cited by other people? It seems like that's kind of our identity in the academy, no? Definitely is not knowledge that is being used by practitioners. No, as one of you said, if you want to do that, let the consultants talk to them. So we are seeding that space, no? So we have to recognize that. That's something we are doing as an academic community, except for what we do teach our MBA students. No, that's it. But I think it's a missed opportunity. No, of course you have to have theory-based journals. We know, but as some of you probably read the famous article in the Wall Street Journal. No, when they asked CEOs of Fortune 500 companies what the Academy of Management Journal was. Nobody knew what it was. And then they gave them some articles to read, and then the managers said, we don't understand what the people are talking about. So kind of interesting. No? So my more specific question is, well, how are you really defining impact? We talk about it all the time, but we dance around it. It's kind of like people are afraid of saying it.
Yes, thank you for your question. And if I may or paraphrase what you just said, linking it to the panel discussion we just had. So we have heard words, well, impact, obviously, but also interesting and important and provocative. And I would like to add one more word or a couple more words, normative and value-based. So maybe you could, from an editor perspective and from an author perspective, sort of react to this. What is impact? If we go again the same line as before.
I think it's an interesting observation, and I think it comes back to, I think there was a thread running through the responses that we gave about whether we're talking about impact of a single article on practice or a single study on practice. I think to extend the analogy that was offered and to pick up on Paula's point previously, you know, I'm triple vaccinated, but I haven't read all of the scientific articles about the study. So I think there is an impact that happens because scholarship takes place. It may not be that this one article led to that practice or every manager is going to read this article. But if we do look back over our field of business and society and organizations and management and so on, we can clearly see that the ideas that have developed, I think, picking up on Constantina's point, over a long period of time do start to have some impact on practice. But it may be, I don't think it's necessarily the requirement that a single article is read by everybody in one article, one study, has that directly translatable impact.
Well, I think it's a really interesting point. What is impact? But it is defined for us in the UK because we have to submit case studies for it, and we actually get funded around that once every 7 or 8 years. So I'll tell you what impact is as defined by that. It is defined as an effect on, change or benefit to the economy, society, culture, public policy or services, health, environment or quality of life beyond academia. But it has to be grounded in research. So it has to be shown that you have published a paper from it. Now, it doesn't mean that that paper has to be the thing that had the impact, but you have to show that the research you did was able to be published in a journal at a certain level so that we know that it is scientifically rigorous. So we have some research centers which do amazing work with industry, but they don't publish that work. They publish other stuff, but not that. So that can't be an impact case study. Then you have to actually demonstrate, and you're allowed 10 pieces of evidence that can show that the work has had the maximum impact it could. So for example, if you studied social workers that were in a particular local community who were trying to prevent problems with child health, then we wouldn't expect that to necessarily translate to all areas, but we would expect to see it have a lot of impact there. Whereas this type of stuff I'm doing, it's global. I have to connect letters of evidence. I have to show how different governments might be using that stuff. Now, I do want to say, I find this slightly problematic in that we might do amazing research, but its ability to impact policy depends on politicians, not on the quality of our research. So I think we need to be careful about that too. It's not like every policy is informed by high quality research or is a good policy. So I think we should keep this point that you say as well, which is do good research, know answers. If there is a moment in the political landscape where that answer might be helpful, you will at least have an answer that has been tested and is rigorous. But you may never get your answer into practice because it is not within your control to do so.
So I agree with everything that you guys said. What can I add? So I guess try and think about what are the metrics we would use, right? So we have citations and Colin already said that impact is thinking beyond that. I think one of the challenges is knowing exactly how to measure it. There's some downsides to that measurement process that Paul is sort of indicating, but for a while we were looking at altmetric scores and how much press you're getting. Is that really impact? I'm not sure that's exactly what I care about in terms of impact. It means it's getting picked up in the press. Is it getting used? I've talked to people that are thinking about trying to measure to what extent research is hitting SDCs and SDGs and sort of being able to measure any journal, like how much is your research sort of tackling SDGs. And so I think there's a lot of there's a lot of movement right now actually thinking about how we might actually measure impact. And I sort of see the journal's role as I'm trying to sort of be attentive to that, and not every paper we publish is going to meet any of those criteria, but trying to support the authors in the ways that we can and getting their work out to the audiences that they care most about.
Thank you. Do our early career scholars also want to react?
I mean, what can I say? But like, I also try to figure out what does it mean by impact. But I think that's a really important question to answer. But to me, having some room to accommodate like different definition of impact is totally fine. Because like, for instance, in our field, we talk about CSR for more than a few decades, but we still hasn't reached out to any sort of consensus in terms of what CSR is. And the same goes for corporate sustainability, etc. What is like grand challenge? Is it a wiki problem? So we still have a lot of different terms to talk about a similar or slightly different phenomena. So here impact could be like, as we said, like through the teaching sort of services, or through like interactions with practitioners. So I think having some room to, in terms of definitions of impact would be okay. That's sort of my perspective.
Thank you. Konstantinos, do you want to react to this?
Yeah, just a very quick one. I mean, because I understand and I share the same frustration sometimes with the comments that was just raised. But for me, publishing a paper is not does not mean it's impactful. But at the same time, to have impact, you need to publish papers. I can't see how you can be impactful without publishing, and it's a very important part of the journey. So for me, that's the key takeaway. It's if somebody wants to have an impact, and for me, impact means, you know, seeing your work and the dissemination of your work having an uptake by people in the industry, not necessarily having a measurable output, but, you know, seeing people using it. And then, for instance, in our case, we've seen people, you know, using some of the frameworks that we have been publishing in reports and also in academic journals, and being used as the language of practitioners in their way to translate their field. So yeah, so that me is very important.
Yeah, what can I add? So I think to me, yeah, rigor. I mean, you mentioned that the person asking the question did mention it. Yeah, so I think it's, you know, strong answers to insights to important problems. And what are important problems? Yes, that is subjective, and different people will have different opinions on it. But I think that to me is sort of the essence of it. And then if we can get that into the hands of people, you know, in a work environment, I think that's when we have had an impact, right? I mean, so I see my students sometimes sort of coming back to me, looking at sort of, you know, the frameworks I'm trying to teach in the class. They are not like Porters by Forces. Like, I'm trying to, you know, put together sort of the more recent work on sustainability. So I'm trying, like, this is pretty early stage. And then I see them trying to kind of play with that as well. I feel like, you know, that is perhaps an impact. I mean, I hope so.
Good, thank you. And Nicholas, do we have any questions from the online audience?
Yes, and in the interest of getting as many questions as possible, and I don't want all of the panelists to feel pressure for everyone to answer every question. If you don't need to do that, you can, of course, if you want to. This question from Katarina Dittrich is focused mostly on the editors, but of course the authors are welcome to answer. And the question is, since the editor plays such a crucial role in guiding the paper, how important is it before submitting a paper to check what potential editors might do themselves in terms of impact or being interested in grand challenges or social problems?
Thank you.
So when you send a paper to ASQ, you can indicate what associate editor you think is the best fit. And I think that would be one of the criteria people would use is, are they doing research in the area that I'm interested in? You know, I can't always assign to that editor because of workload, and, you know, I often sort of know what their more current research is, and maybe you could sort of see by looking at their profile. But people are certainly encouraged and welcome to suggest the editors that they think are the best fits.
Then, do we have any questions from the audience here?
Okay, I'm gonna do this way. I'm Haitao Yu from Yim Leung Business School. I'm actually a volunteer for the Impact Scholar community. I read the book from Andy Hoffman. I think, gosh, I'm sorry, I'm jet lagged. Okay, again, so the analogy Paula used about impact, you used healthcare research, right? And I read the book from Andy Hoffman. He used the analogy with the climate science. But I think for like healthcare or climate science, that's the science. There is something that we are approaching. There is a reality that we will see. There is a single reality we are trying to understand, right? It doesn't change. But for management study, actually what we study and how we understand will change the thing that the phenomenon that we study. And I think maybe there is a difference about the mechanism that we make impact between the two kind of science, the health, climate, that's like the natural science, and the thing that we study about the human world. So I think that the question kind of going to Paula. Do you have thought on that?
Oh yeah, I got thoughts on that. I got thoughts on most things, to be honest, but that one in particular. Social science is a science. That's the first thing I want to say. So even if I were to talk about climate change or healthcare, it is impossible to talk about that as if it was some abstract reality that we knew the answer to it, and all we need to do is the things that create that answer. Okay, because I would say climate change is the most socially contested and confusing thing. What is it? How is it affecting it? And which things might we do to make a difference? If any of you know that answer, or any climate scientist knows that answer and still keep society alive, I would be thrilled, but we don't have that answer. Because the truth is, it is not a hard science. Or if it is a hard science, it's really hard to find the answer is the thing. So social science is absolutely critical, because social science tells us how do we as a world navigate these incredibly complex things where there isn't a single answer. And I feel that social science needs much more role in these things, because as you pointed out, we've been talking about CSR for over 20 years now. We've known the world is heating up for decades, and yet we have not done anything because we haven't incorporated the science of the social that tells us why people fail to interact, why people fail to act, how we can stimulate small actions that make change. So for me, social science is science, and I say it's the science we really need to start knitting some of these complex answers together.
Thank you. And I think we had one more question here, and then we can go to the online for
yeah, we do have more online questions too.
Good.
That's so strange, actually. That's super strange. but I tried really that way. Like we've been talking a lot about impact happening after the research, so post publication. What's your opinion on the researcher having impact already during the research process? So focusing, for example, more on action research, because my feeling when doing ethnography is that there are many times where I'm like, now I could have impact. Now I want to tell whatever recommendation I feel I could have on, but then I'm again, okay, I have to back down. You're just an observer, and this is my role as a researcher, and don't engage, don't intervene. So what's your opinion on or ideas about researchers having impact during the research process already? Thank you.
What is your name?
I'm Iris, sorry.
Thank you.
anyone who wants to react?
Can I?
Yes. Let's start with the
Yeah, so it's a very challenging point. I'd say, as an ethnographer myself, I have those kind of like moments of, when you sit down and you observe people talking and you want to just get into the conversation and react. And, we need to avoid that because we need to be impartial. But at the same time, I think we don't need to wait after we publish to kind of like make points about how we can have impact in the field. I think when we gradually exiting a field or we phasing out, our data collection, there is a point there in time that we can actually start engaging into conversations and start, producing preliminary reports, reports with preliminary findings, and keeping up that conversation. And I think also for us as researchers, there is a practical reason for doing that, which is, you know, you want to keep in touch with these people. You know, you want to keep being relevant. And I think if you fully exit the field and you don't keep that conversation on until the point you publish a paper, I mean, people would probably not even remember you by then. So you need to keep in touch. But there is, you need to strike a fine balance between, you know, not intervening into your research if you're not doing actual research. But I'm not an action researcher, so I'm not going to talk about that. As an ethnographer, I'm talking here, and the point of, you know, starting interacting when you're slowly, gradually phasing out your data collection.
So, I mean, I think, and also even in quantitative work, so I don't know, Christian, sort of how you did it with the company that you were in, but often, right, part of the access is giving them feedback about what you've learned, you know, not while you're collecting it in the quantitative, but afterwards. That is certainly part of the impact. Actually, one of the award-winning papers that I sort of referenced was actually an interesting one where it was Irene Padovac and Robin Eli and Aaron Reed's paper, and they were in a big consulting firm. They were trying to figure out why are they having challenges sort of with women in their workforce, and it turns out the consulting group didn't really like the answer they came up with, because the answer was, it's actually not a woman problem. It's a problem with how you're organizing work, and no one really likes it, and you're losing women, but no one's really happy with this, and and really the organization didn't like that at all, right? And so they ended up writing a paper sort of in reaction, really about why is it that this organization really rejected the results of their study, and what did that really say about sort of the 24/7 work culture. And so I guess I use that as an example only to say that you know, sometimes that relationship can be fraught, and I can't think of any action research that we published, but that's an interesting one where they were actively trying to be doing that kind of work, and the interesting stuff actually came with the reaction to the study that they had done.
Yeah, I think in terms of action research, we haven't published a lot of it, but we're very open to it. And coming back to some of the points that were raised before, if it's done properly, if it's rigorous, if it's consistent with the philosophy, if it's consistent with the research problem and the research question, we would evaluate it. We've got associate editors and reviewers that would evaluate it according to the philosophy. If it's around emancipation through the research process, etc., then again, if it's rigorous, if it's done well, it's done properly, and it's appropriate, we'd be very open to it.
Thank you. And then
oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm just going to
please.
quickly jump in if we have a second or no.
Christian, go ahead. I think you've been trying to unmute over and over again, so go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say yes. I was just sort of following up on Christine's point. Yes, so in our case, in fact, we got access to our data because there was a problem in the organization, and they're trying to basically understand how initially how employees would be, you know, affected by these kinds of programs as part of their corporate careers, right? So that's how we got access to the data. And of course, because it's quantitative data, and, you know, once you archival data, once you have it, you can't really contaminate the data. You can certainly contaminate the relationship. But so in our case, we were very lucky because, you know, ultimately there's sort of two papers that we wrote from the data set that's just archival data. And one of them was about retention. Do people who take part in socially impactful work stay longer with the firm? It turns out they do. And that was the answer that they were very much hoping for. So that was the paper we published first. And so, you know, we gave them the results, and they put even numbers behind it and sort of started circulating it internally, like, look how much money we're saving. We're like, whoa, we didn't say that. And then the second, but the other paper basically suggested that there were, you know, some biases in organization, like in probably many organizations, and how, right, that would have the career consequences. And that was a lot harder, obviously, to disseminate. But I mean, but they know. So, but of course, time also passes, and that sometimes can be a good thing. So this is based on old data, and maybe they don't care as much anymore as they would have a few years ago.
Thank you for sharing. And Nicholas, can we take one last question from the online audience?
Yes, I do want to briefly mention to Iris's question, the Impact Scholar community did an event on the emotional impact of doing impact work, and you can see the recording on our YouTube channel if you'd like to check that out. It's related to what you were asking about. Stefanos Anastasiadis asks, how do the panelists rate popular sources like The Conversation for disseminating research work? And have they had feedback of any sort that such extra work has borne fruit in any way? And I'm going to channel this towards Christian and Colin, because you both mentioned specific publications earlier, such as SSIR and HBR, and Colin, you mentioned channels for different audiences. So if you'd like to take this, feel free. Others also can chime in.
Yeah, like we're very open to that. And I think it comes back to, I've been reflecting on the conversation that we've been having. And I think one thing that's exercising my mind out of all of this is, where does the responsibility of the journal start and stop? Where is the responsibility of the author and the researcher and their business school? You know, business schools, AACSB and Equus are all about impact these days. And so there is a responsibility on the schools in terms of workload allocations, in terms of the metrics, the performance metrics that the schools use in order to evaluate their the work of the faculty as well. Can journals, as part of a broader ecosystem, facilitate more of this type of work while retaining its focus on the good rigor? And then perhaps the onus is on us to help to enable those other mechanisms that are experts and available to do that. But yeah, we're very, very keen on that. We don't place any restrictions on the work that's published in our journal through that being disseminated through those other channels. We have established our blogs as well, but the conversation, and I think specifically the question for the conversation reminded me that, you know, there are these different responsibilities of others within this knowledge production process.
And just to follow up on that, so, you know, we can't write a conversation piece, but if I look at when we were preparing for our editorial board meeting, you know, what are the articles that have had the most impact? When it's written about in the conversation and referenced, those are hugely influential. So, I mean, I think that's a great way for impact. I'm not sure what I can do on that. The conversation doesn't let me write articles about the articles I publish, but it is, I think, actually a terrific way to get impact more broadly.
And I actually, we have put some of our work that we've published then into the conversation because, I mean, okay, so one of the journals in which we have published does develop an insights, and for 1 month it's open access, but then it's behind a paywall. So it's not very useful to practitioners. But we also did a conversation piece that was very useful. You can also then give that to your practitioners and they can share it on their websites and show it to people and say, and they're pleased because for them, they know that this thing was rigorous, but here's also something I can share with people to read. I actually think that they really like that. And also, if you've published something in the conversation and then we study disasters are happening all the time, then the media is looking for something about disasters, they know you're there, and then you can tell people, look, I've got some research-informed stuff about this, if you would like actually an informed soundbite as opposed to just a soundbite. So we try to do that.
Good, thank you. And to close, it's always very important to also get advice for other early career scholars. So what advice would you give to early career scholars for the publication process? Let's start online, yes. Konstantinos, would you want to start?
Yeah. So I'm going to be consistent with what I said for the whole session, and for me, it's something I really enjoy, and I think it's important is to not compromise on focusing only on impact or only on publishing. Both are very important, and there are synergies between them. Impact work can help you with access. It can even help you write better papers, and work on academic papers, publishing papers, can help you delve deeper and better understand your context and essentially make you more relevant and more impactful. So for me, the takeaway is that, you know, impact work and publishing work, you know, go hand in hand.
Thank you. Christina, do you have one sentence of advice?
Yeah, my advice would be, and I think this is maybe what worked for me, is especially if you're still in a PhD program, is a really good time to invest in, you know, not only like reading widely, getting a really broad grasp on the literature, because I think that's going to help you later, but also really invest in getting some kind of proprietary data. I mean, not proprietary in a sense that you don't want to share with other people, but just kind of data that you really can invest in and sort of, you know, that's going to allow you to answer lots of questions that you have, because it's really hard to find the time later on to invest in that. So if you can get that data and maybe like link it to public sources or like do interesting things with it, I think that is quite useful, right? So like sort of think about the questions that you think are interesting, and there are probably loads of them. And it just, if you collect some data that lets you answer at least some of them, I think that sets you up pretty well then too, right? You know, you're the only person who has thought that deeply about that specific area perhaps. And then, you know, bring in your broad literature. And I think that can be quite helpful.
Thank you. And now I have to ask our in-person audience to be very short if there's any advice you want to share, because I don't want our online audience to drop off. So is there a one sentence advice that you'd like to share to close off?
Okay, I'll jump in. Yeah, I think that your university wants you to do impact now. It still wants you to get top publications, and don't throw your career away on impact that doesn't have a publication. But if you can do both, and if you can allocate some time to that, I think it's a growth area, so it'll probably do you good. They'll find a way to measure it and maybe one day reward you.
I'll just say, you know, study things that matter to you, and then work hard on trying to articulate why it matters to a broader audience.
Yeah, and I would say we've talked about lots of different ways of thinking about impact. Find the impact genre that plays to your strengths. Perhaps your impact is going to be on the field, on scientific knowledge, and be comfortable with that if that's who you are. Perhaps it's like Jung Hoon, you find opportunities to weave it into your teaching. Perhaps you are motivated to be writing blogs. Perhaps you would like to work in teams where there's other people, maybe with the practitioners that you've studied with, who are interested in writing for the conversation or for others. So I think find your impact genre and work that into your profile of who you are, your identity as a scholar.
As a PhD student, if you want to, I mean, I got a lot of pushbacks when I talked about health-related topics. What are you talking about? Are you trying to get a job at a public policy school, or you are not no longer interested in like business school? But I believe that if you find an ally, like my advisor was really supportive of pursuing the topic at the intersection of business and health. So if you are a PhD student, maybe looking for your allies might be helpful in terms of pursuing the topics that what matters to you.
Thank you. And Sylvia, if you are still there, do you want to close the session?
Yes, I would like to. So first of all, thank you all for coming. Thank you to our panelists. And thank you also Marlene and Simon for being there in person. I think it was a great event, wonderful discussions. And as you all have seen, we always try to invite panelists that show the diversity of impact work. So you have seen we had great discussions about what impact is actually, does it mean? And you've gotten different answers. And that's what we always try to do in our events. We don't just want to show one side of it. We want to show kind of, the variety you have. And just from our side, from the Impact Scholar community side, we would like to invite you to stay in touch with us if you want. We have more events upcoming. AOM is just one of our events that we have throughout the year. So the next event like this is going to be in fall, and the topic will be announced soon. We also have monthly impact happy hours where we just kind of informally talk about what's on our mind in terms of impact, and we want to really build that community among early career scholars. So just come and join us and start talking about with whatever is on your mind. So that's why we're here for. If you want to kind of stay in touch with us, you can follow us on Twitter or send us an email, or you can also sign up for our community if you just go to our homepage. So that's from our side. Thank you very much, everyone. We really appreciate it. It was a wonderful discussion.
Thank you also to Marlene and Simon for handling the in-person. Excellent work, everyone. And journals, editors, include tag us in your tweets. We'll retweet you.
Sylvia has built a huge Twitter following.
Thank you, everyone.
It's like they're closing up again. Thank you again, Konstantinos and Christiana.
Yeah, Christina.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Have an excellent
Thank
conference.
you. Thank you for inviting me.